So, good morning. This has been a very sad week. Our dear teacher, Lama Sopa Rinpoche, has passed away, and has his holy mind has actually left his holy body. What they call what they call tukdam, which means kind of like meditating on the clear light. And his body, I believe, is at Kopan, unless someone has heard something more, and will be embalmed eventually, not according to Western embalming, with embalming fluid, but according to the way that the ancient kings and holy beings in Tibet were embalmed. Generally, holy beings, lamas and so forth who passed away, are usually cremated. It's only the rare ones that are embalmed. But the past Ling Rinpoche, who had been my preceptor for the bhikshu vows, was embalmed. He was the Gandantipa, the throne holder of the Gelugpa tradition. And he was a senior tutor of the Dalai Lama, besides being one of the great tantric practitioners and scholars of Tibet. And apparently that same procedure is going to be used with Lama Zopa, because the present reincarnation of Ling Rinpoche suggested that. And then the query was double-checked with His Holiness, who said that would be good. So Lama Zopa's holy body will be preserved that way, not just in the form of ashes or relics and so forth. Hello, Melvin. Good to see so many people. So we're going to begin with a short meditation. We're not going to do the meditation prayers, and then we're going to recite we're going to recite this one verse praise of Tara that was offered to Atisha by Tara herself. Praise of the 21 Taras. We're going to recite that 7 times. So find a good, comfortable position. Sit comfortably. Watch your mind for a few minutes, for a few moments. Try to bring your attention to the clear light nature of your mind. Foregoing our usual extended period of watching the breathing, simply just go to your mental consciousness, watch its contents, thereby getting a way to recognize the conventional clear light nature that's underlying all the appearances of the mind. All your emotions, your thoughts, your hopes, your fears, your worries, your emotions are all like clouds within that clear light nature of your mind. See if you can bring a remembering consciousness of that back. This conventional Buddha nature, or conventional clear light nature of the mind, is called the developmental Buddha nature. The fact that the mind has no obstructing quality to the entry of or the exit of thoughts and emotions. It has no, what would we say, no viscosity. It doesn't hinder the arisal or leaving of thoughts and images and so forth. So we can definitely generate all of the virtuous qualities that we now lack. We can increase the good. We can eliminate the bad. The fact that we can recognize that is due to this auspicious moment right now that we have of a life of leisure and endowment. That's the result of our past virtuous deeds and prayers to have this opportunity to be able to help others. This precious moment is highly meaningful. We can use it to achieve realizations. We can use it to achieve liberation and enlightenment, even in this lifetime. But it is impermanent. Like our Holy Guru Lama Zopa Rinpoche, we will eventually die. And all the plans that we had to practice the Dharma that we never actualized, once we die, we will be unable to actualize. So thinking with compassion, with empathy for all living beings who have been our mothers numberless times in the past, who have been depthlessly kind to us, in order to effect a repayment of their kindness, as we would to our parents, the debt of gratitude that we owe to them. Think that I must achieve enlightenment for their sake. To do that, I must accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. In order to do that, I need to know about the teachings, both the method side and the wisdom side. So I'm going to participate in the class today, the discourse on Lama Tsongkhapa's great illumination of the intention, Gompa Rabsel in Tibetan, his commentary on Chandrakirti's own explanation of his Madhyamaka Avatara Karikas, the verses. I'm going to participate today in order to quickly become enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings. At the beginning of all the practices, especially in Tantra, there's always verses like this. I'm going to engage in this practice of Yamataka or Vajrayogini or Haruka or Tara in order to become enlightened for the sake of sentient beings. So here we're going to engage in this, in the listening, contemplating, and wisdom on the topic of the illumination of the intent. With that purpose in mind, that's my aim, to become enlightened for the sake of effortlessly, spontaneously, perfectly, without error, removing sentient beings from suffering and placing them into everlasting, blissful happiness of enlightenment. And then bringing your attention back to the present. Just you see Sheila, Diana are here, Mikhail. Good to see you. So, as you know, our Holy Guru Lama Zopa Rinpoche has passed away a couple of days ago after visiting a mountainous region in Nepal, and where he took the aspect of having high altitude sickness, was brought back to Kathmandu, where he was tried to be revived, but they couldn't revive him. He sat for some time in clear light at Kopan. Clear light meditation, the Tibetans call Tukdam. And he has shown the signs of his mind leaving, a red drop coming to his left nostril, and so forth. And his body is being prepared to be embalmed. So we have been advised by various lamas to do Tara practices. And there, I think perhaps today, was there a session today, just before this? Does anyone know? Yeah.
Yes.
So there will be every day. I will lead, on Mondays, I will lead that session at 12 to 12:30. And one of the things we'll be doing is reciting some practices of Tara, but in particular, this one verse that was is considered to be in certain circumstances a substitute. Oh, Jennifer says they will be at 12:30. I thought they were at 12, Jennifer.
Originally, we were thinking, but then 12:30 is what manifested. Would that still be okay for you, Venerable George?
Okay, so I go from 12:30, and then we have discussion. Okay, yeah, that works. We have discussion at 2. Yeah, that's no problem. I'm sorry. So it's at 12:30. So, Jennifer, Mary Ellen, could you put up this PDF of this verse? This is from one of the archives of prayers in this that one of the Sakyas tradition has. And first of all, just scroll down to the colophon at the end in English. There we go. So it says, when the incomparable Lord Atisha was staying at Netang, he suddenly became quite ill. He supplicated Tara. Of course, Tara was Atisha's special deity. That was his main practice. She had prophesied to him that if he came to Tibet, he would be very beneficial, even though his life would be shortened. She gave a prophecy that he would meet his eventual close attendant, Dromdempa, great reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, many amazing things like that. And when he was quite ill, he supplicated Tara and requested her intervention. The noble goddess appeared before him and told him that to cure his sickness, he must recite the praise of the 21 Taras at least 10,000 times in a single day. Atisha replied that would be impossible for him to do. Can you imagine 10,000 recitations of the praise of the 21 Taras? And impossible for him to do so, and asked if there wasn't another way. Tara replied by granting him this extremely concise praise coming from Tara herself. This praise is said to be highly blessed. This was translated by our dear friend Sean Price. So if you go back to the center of that homage here, so the idea is that as it's said that making prayers and meditations on Tara is one of the ways, along with meditation on impermanence, death, and bodhicitta, are ways that we could best ensure Lama Zopa's quick return. We're going to recite this 7 times in English. It's said that in the 4 mandala offering of Chittamati Tara, it's said that or in the benefits of the praises of the 21, I should say, 21 praises of Tara, it's said that if one recites twice, 3 times, or was it twice, 7 times, or 21 times, that one's wishes can be fulfilled, and so forth. So we're going to recite this 7 times right now, thinking in essence, the reason that we're doing this, again, motivating, is for the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. So the first line is usually it just, when it says in Tibetan, Om Je Suma Pama Droma La Chaksalo, Pakma Droma La Chaksalo, it means I pay homage to the Venerable Tara, but as Sean has translated here, Om, I submit obeisance to Tara, she who is both exalted and revered. I prostrate to Tara, the courageous saviors, who dispels all fears with Tutara and grants all with Ture. With Svaha, I offer my final homage, or homage. Then we can leave off the first line. I prostrate to Tara, the courageous saviors, who dispels all fear with Tutara and grants all with Ture. With Svaha, I offer my final homage. I prostrate to Tara, the courageous saviors, who dispels all fear with Tutara and grants all with Ture. With Svaha, I offer my final homage. I prostrate to Tara, the courageous saviors, who dispels all fear with Tutara and grants all with Ture. With Svaha, I offer my final homage. I prostrate to Tara, the courageous saviors, who dispels all fears with Tutara and grants all with Ture. With Svaha, I offer my final homage. I prostrate to Tara, the courageous saviors, who dispels all fears with Tutara and grants all with Ture. With Svaha, I offer my final homage. And then the last recitation, recite the first line again also. Om, I submit obeisance to Tara, she who is both exalted and revered. I prostrate to Tara, the courageous saviors, who dispels all fears with Tutara and grants all with Ture. With Svaha, I offer my final homage. And then think, I dedicate these merits of reciting this special praise, homage to Tara 7 times for the quick return, swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's holy presence in the world to guide us and future generations as he has done this past life. Okay. So good to see you. I think some people are still off. I think Snehi is still in Arizona. I think. No, is she back? Okay. So we're going to begin class in a moment. Any questions from, about this present situation, about with Lama Zopa Rinpoche? Any questions about previous classes? Oh, of course. Toby, speak slowly for me, like I'm a 4-year-old.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Yes.
Just a very simple one today. What is really correct about Svaha or Soha on the end of the mantra? Why is there Svaha, some people say, and then some people say Soha?
Right. Well, in Tibetan, there's not the part of their language, the letter V. So for instance, even though we recognize the word for the ritual implement, the immutable instrument we call Vajra, right? We call the Vajrayana, Vajrasattva deity, and so forth, the Vajra path. They say Benza, right? They don't have the V sound. Comes out with a B instead of a V. Same thing with Svaha, right? Svaha is how do you see Svaha written, Toby?
Like that's Svaha, you're pronouncing the...
No, Svaha, right?
Mhm.
In Sanskrit. So the Tibetans can't manage that. So the closest they come is to say Soha. So it is probably better to say Svaha unless you're reciting along with a group of Tibetan lamas or other Tibetan monks who are all saying Soha, and probably better not to, try to. They might think you're disrespecting them by saying something that you think is more proper. Generally, His Holiness the Dalai Lama said that the pronunciation of mantras is generally, it's good if you have faith in a particular pronunciation, even if the pronunciation is wrong. That is more beneficial than having doubt about reciting it in a way that you don't think is right. Like he's saying, Svaha doesn't sound right. My Lama always says Soha, so say Soha then. But in order to achieve the highest siddhis, which means enlightenment, you have to pronounce the mantras as they are pronounced in Sanskrit.
Thank you.
Okay, so you can choose. If you like Soha, you can say Soha, but generally in Sanskrit it's Spaha.
Thank you.
Jennifer.
Yes, thank you so much, Venerable George. I had a follow-up question from our study group on Monday, which might be appropriate with Rinpoche's passing.
Yes.
If I understood correctly, you had said that even with the realization of emptiness, we still have potentials in our mind stream based on past actions. And then bodhisattvas, out of their own wish, can take rebirth as a hell being, a preta, an animal, making use of those karmic seeds that are not ripened. And I'm wondering if you could kindly explain that a bit more, and also what the mind state of the bodhisattva might be, even though their physical manifestation is of these different realms.
Yeah. Well, there were the bodhisattva, let's say, for instance, in the Jataka tales, you've heard that name before, right, Jennifer? The Jataka tales, the stories of the Buddha Shakyamuni's previous incarnations when he was on the bodhisattva path, life stories. So he often, many times would take rebirth as a human, but sometimes took rebirth as an animal, and took rebirth in other realms also. And before you're enlightened, when you can, and say, for instance, bodhisattvas can probably send manifestations to those realms also, which are not rebirths, but on the bodhisattva path, you can actually, ripen the seeds on your mind stream of rebirth in those realms, and by your own motivation, by your own prayer at the time of a death. What is it called? I can't remember, something sabongi cha. The seeds that are some part of the seeds that are amenable to ripening. They won't ripen due to karma and delusion, so you won't be reborn in the lower realms due to karma and delusion, because you've eliminated the ripening factor at the time of death, craving and grasping that will cause them. But you can choose yourself to wish to be born there for the sake of sentient beings. Does that help?
Um, yes, I think so. And then could you kindly explain what the bodhisattva's mind would be like if
Oh
they
yeah.
were?
So yeah. So you'd mentioned that. So I think the mind would be of the level, their intelligence would have the potential of being, realizing emptiness. Because let's say if someone is on one of the bhumis, if one is on the first bhumi, if on the path of seeing, when you're practicing generosity, or if you're on the second or third bhumi and so forth, say when you're practicing patience and so forth, you would have that potential, but you would manifest, your intention of going to these realms is to benefit sentient beings. So you would manifest having a mind of that animal realm. Let's say if you were born as a deer, as an antelope or something like that. There are many stories when the Dalai Lama was, when the Buddha was born as an animal, like a very beautiful kind of deer, and was actually able to speak, that other humans could hear, and when the king was asked to, or when someone was hunting for him, he actually would enunciate, you shouldn't do this and so forth, and which sort of shocked people. So you would have those realizations in your mind, but you would still manifest generally as that animal rebirth. Let's say if you were born as an animal. That's what I understand anyway.
Thank you. And this
Yeah.
is probably my self-cherishing mind asking this question, but I think in Guru Puja, they say, may I, whatever, stay in hell for, eons, practicing patience for the benefit of one sentient being. Does that Buddha mind experience the suffering of hells, or is it more a karmic vision of what the hell realm beings are experiencing? And yeah.
Okay, so that may refer to the motivation before you've actually achieved those bhumis, because when you achieve those bhumis, you're not going to be experiencing the same kind of suffering as we would in imagination. Say, for instance, to have the patience when you're on our level now, before you actually enter into the bhumis, when you're practicing the special practices of the perfection of patience and so forth, or this is particularly talking about the perfection of perseverance, like in the Lama Chopa, may I have the perseverance or the joyous effort to remain even in the hell realms for countless eons in the fires of hell, in order to ripen one sentient being. So the bodhisattva would have that kind of patience, but they wouldn't be experiencing that same kind of suffering, right? But from our level, when we try to emulate that behavior, we try to have that same kind of perseverance, putting up with, maybe irritations to our life, other people that are irritating, or politicians that are irritating, or, different kinds of situations like that, in order to be emblematic by our behavior, even though we don't have those higher realizations, to show people that we can be patient and so forth, even in the midst of being criticized or harmed and so forth. Like His Holiness, the criticism that came about recently because of some misinterpretation of his actions, not showing any kind of resentment, but persevering and so forth. So the two, patience and perseverance are both involved in something like that. Patience in the sense of not retaliating and accepting and so forth, apologizing, and persevering, not giving up in the face of, these kinds of different kind of suffering situations. Okay. Diana, you have a question?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I do not understand. You gave Toby two perfectly correct answers, and I do not understand which to follow, having to do with the pronunciation of the last two syllables of the short Tara mantra, because it's automatic for me and has been for many years to say soha.
Right.
And that goes with the first piece of advice. But then the second piece of advice seems to indicate that it is better to say svaha. And I don't know which I should do.
Right. Well, so either if it's let's say there are many, many stories, and you've probably heard some of these anecdotes before. There was one lady, one grandmother,
Yes.
I think in Tibet,
Yeah.
who was reciting a mantra to turn that would allow her to eat stones during a famine. She had incredible faith. And, her son, who had become ordained, came back home and said, "Oh, you're mispronouncing that mantra." She had been able to survive because she had great faith in her pronunciation. But when she tried to change it, because there was some lingering doubt in her mind, it didn't work. So if you have great faith, and you're accustomed to pronouncing it soha, that's fine. What His Holiness has said, in order to achieve the supreme siddhi, which means enlightenment, the mantras have to be pronounced according to the Sanskrit, which is not like something special that Sanskrit existed in India, or something special, but that the desire realm gods are said to speak Sanskrit. Is that what you've heard, Paul?
Yeah, I believe that's what they say. I was gonna say my recommendation to people when they ask me about this is I say don't learn Sanskrit. I say because once you learn Sanskrit, all it will do will cause you to become annoyed every time you go to a Dharma center.
Yeah, they're saying
John knows what I'm talking about.
Benzabumi Ahum or something.
Yes, by Kanze, I can't even do it. The medicine Buddha one.
Right. Bekanza instead of by Shaije.
Yes. So I tell people, unless you're committing to 20 years of Sanskrit, don't learn it. Just stick with it.
So that's probably good advice. Okay. So soha is fine unless you're on the completion stage of highest yoga tantra, dhyana, and you're at that point probably you should say svaha. But by that time,
Okay, so I'll make a note for many lifetimes from now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anything else? How about our previous class material? Anyone have doubts about what we've been talking about? So just to put an end to, we've already entered into the second bhumi. That sounds auspicious, doesn't it? Just to put a final touch, review in the first bhumi, we try to give away our body, our possessions, and our merits of the three times. But also generally, when we talk about generosity, there are said to be in the general Buddhist tradition, there's said to be two kinds of generosity. Do you know what I'm talking about, Rachel? Two kinds of generosity?
Sorry, I guess you're talking about giving material wealth and giving dharma?
Right. One can offer. So it's said that the sphere of giving for lay people is predominantly, unless you're well educated and so forth, is predominantly giving material, making offerings and so forth, supporting the Sangha and so forth. And the domain of the ordained is mainly, they shouldn't be involved in collecting material in order to give material things. Their main object of generosity is giving the Dharma, which means teaching, offering advice, and explanation of the teachings. In the Mahayana, there's added, in the general Bodhisattva path, there's added a third kind of generosity. Does anyone know what that is? Rachel?
Fearlessness.
Generally, a giving of love. And in Tantra, there are four, which adds to giving material, giving Dharma, giving love, giving fearlessness. So if you're familiar, some of you who've taken tantric vows, if you go over the vows, when it talks about the vows associated with Ratnasambhava, it says to offer 6 times a day the 4 kinds of giving, the 4 kinds of generosity. So that would mean, giving material. So you would offer, let's say on your altar, you would offer water every day. If you're not in a position, even if you're alone in your hermitage and you don't have the chance to offer to people outside material, you offer water to the Buddhas, or, flowers and incense and light and other things. You offer the Dharma, and that can include, your meditation of offering the Dharma. You can recite mantras, imagining that you're offering that to the insects and the birds that are around. You offer love when you do the 4 immeasurables, and you offer fearlessness, which means, for instance, one way to offer fearlessness or freedom from fear is those that are oppressed, let's say like animals that are about to be slaughtered. You would try to save them from the slaughter. Like Lama Zopa Rinpoche oftentimes would buy sheep or other animals, even larger animals that were about to be slaughtered, and set them free on some land that he had either owned or had some, relationship with the owner, so the animals wouldn't be slaughtered. Also, the tradition of what's it called when you save the life of fish and so forth? What's that called in our FPMT? Does anyone know?
Liberating.
What's it called? Liberating sentient beings. Liberating sentient beings, right? So there was one man in Singapore. He used to be a major in the army, Fred Tsong. Eventually, he became a bhikshu, and he arranged for truckloads of mollusk and other kinds of sea fish that were about to be brought to the markets. He would arrange truckloads of them to be brought back to the ocean and liberated like that. It's said that is, has great value in elongating, causing an elongation of one's own lifespan and eliminating, hindrances to your life. So there are various kinds of giving. My teacher, Lama Yeshe, used to say that one of the giving material and these other things were not so difficult. What was really difficult was to give your own time. We don't like to be bothered by people, asking us, help me, do this, do that. And Lama Yeshe, I remember once when he and I were walking once, and Lama said, "Oh, I can teach you that." And I said, "Oh, but Lama, you don't have enough time." And Lama looked at me and said, "Even time is empty, you know? You shouldn't think that you don't have enough time." So, when I was in college, university, I remember one weekend going out. I think we went to a bar or something, before Buddhism, and met or coffee house, I'm not sure. And I met some people, one young lady that I felt attracted to. I followed her and her friends back to her place. And it turned out one of the other friends was her boyfriend, who was incredible, and doing, musician and everything. But it turned out that every day he apportioned a certain number of hours of the day of his own time to go out and help people with their problems, whether it be they needed their sink fixed, or the what's it called, the toilets didn't flush or something, or with emotional problems, to sit with people and talk about their things. And that inspired me very much. I think that's very much aligned with the bodhisattva behavior. Serkon Sencha Rinpoche, one of the tutors of the Dalai Lama, whose reincarnation is still with us, Serkon Sencha Rinpoche was a teacher of both Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche also. He used to say that he would get up, I think he would usually get up at what, maybe anyone know, 3:30 or 3:30 in the morning, and do all his prayers, all his practices, so that the rest of the day he was free to help sentient beings. He had the time. So that's another way of thinking of practicing generosity every day, to give your time. When people call you and you say, "Oh, I don't have time," to think of that. Okay. So I just wanted to share that. So we had gotten up to, in Jipa's book, page 118, in Hopkins' translation in that book called Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism, page 193. And just we were talking about the 7 abandonments that Chimpa calls the 7 relinquishments. And we were talking about the 3rd one, right view, which opposes wrong view. So just to reiterate that, so we're just beginning the 2nd bhumi, the stainless. We've talked about showing that morality is perfected on this ground. We're in that section, that very first section. We talked about the word, the Sanskrit word for morality, shila, and how some of the etymology comes from the word shita, which refers to coolness, and lati, which means to attain, so to become cool. So there's kind of, what do we say? What are some of the ways that people say, "Oh man, what did they say? Not he's cool." I can't remember this. Like he's just mellow. Kind of
Chilled out.
Chilled out. There it is. That's what I'm thinking. He said chilled out, kind of like Shila. He's obtained coolness of mind. Nothing bothers him. So that's kind of where we were. And so, with regard to its actual nature, Shila, morality, is defined in terms of the 7 abandonments, Jimpa's calling relinquishments, the abandoning of the 7 immoral actions of body and speech. And it mentioned that in general, in the Pratimoksha, we talk about just these 7 abandonments of negative actions of body and speech, because the negative actions of mind are not capable of being held back by a vow. There's something, when you make a strong vow not to do something, you create something that's called a non-revelatory form. Do you remember that from many years ago, Don, when we talked about tenets and Lorig at Land of Medicine Buddha, non-revelatory form?
I would say vaguely.
Vaguely. Diana, do you remember? No, okay. So when you make a very strong determination, I will not do this, it creates some kind of form which is not revealed to others, but can be observed by beings with psychic powers that recognize that you have these good qualities. Also, you can create these non-revelatory forms if you think, I'm going to kill so-and-so, I'm going to get rid of the government or something like that. That creates something also that others can perceive. So generally in the pratimoksha, there are only abstentions from negative actions of body and speech, both of which are formed. So it says, morality is defined in terms of the 7 abandonments, the abandoning of the 7 immoral acts of body and speech. The underlying states of mind that give rise to these 7 abandonments, that is, absence of covetousness, which is by its nature an antidote to attachment. That's called non-attachment. It doesn't just mean the absence of attachment, it means an antidote to attachment. The abandonment of harmful intent or malice, which is non-aversion, which is the antidote to hatred and aversion, and right view, which is the opposes wrong view. So that's where we were going to start today. By including these motivating factors, say in the pratimoksha, you just have 7, but in the bodhisattva path, you're talking about not just those 7, but also the more subtle motivating factors of, abandoning covetousness, malice, and wrong view. That gives you the 10 abandonments. The 10 refers to the 10 relinquishments, 10 positive courses of action that overcome the 10 negative courses of action. So if you were to just follow those negative states of mind, those are called the 10 paths. He says courses. We say the 10 paths of non-virtue. Is there a difference? Nadine, do you remember when we talked earlier about the 10 negative actions, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, and the 10 paths of non-virtue? Do you remember what the difference is? Why the word path adds something there?
I think there have to be about 4 points which have to be fulfilled in order that it becomes a whole path of action.
Right. You have to recognize the object. You have to have an intention to do something. You have to be accompanied by a delusion and so forth. You have to complete the act and so forth. So when he says the 10 positive courses of action, or the 10 paths of action that overcome the 10 negative paths of action. So having that kind of morality, these 10 positive states of mind and body and speech, are positive, they're positive karma, they're positive actions. Okay. How are we doing? Everyone okay? Okay. So next outline says, showing that on this basis, the qualities become completely purified. As Jeffrey says, how does it say? thorough pacification of features in dependence on ethics. So Jimpa quotes from the Karikas, which again, I've said this many times, but just say it once again. The Karikas are not embedded in Lama Tsongkhapa's Tibetan text. The translator has to sort of add them in. That's why you might find them in different places in Jeffrey's translation and in Jimpa's translation, because it's up to the translator to place it in a place that seems appropriate. So this is the last two lines of the first verse, or we say 2.1. That means the second chapter, first verse. CD means of 4 lines in Tibetan, the last 2 lines. Since all movements of his body, speech, and mind are pure, the first grounder accumulates the excellent virtue of all 10 paths of action. So there, for instance, here, Jeffrey puts the question beforehand. Here in Jimpa's text, he says, one might ask. Jeffrey puts that before the quotation of the Karika. He says, how does a bodhisattva's qualities become pure? Through the sublimity of his ethics. Or here Jimpa says, how do the qualities of this bodhisattva come to be purified because of his perfect morality? And Lama Tsongkhapa's answer to that. So that's a qualm, right? Since all his movements, his or her movements, the threefold activity of body, speech, and mind are pure. They don't engage in negative actions of body and speech or mind. Without even subtle downfalls throughout their waking and dream states, that bodhisattva accumulates without omission, means continuously, the sublime or excellent virtues of all 10 paths of action. So that's the advantage of having this state of mind, whether you've taken it by a formal vow, pratimoksha vow, or whether you just, without having taken that kind of vow, made a very strong determination not to engage in these negative activities. You are constantly creating virtuous karma. They accumulate without omission. They accumulate continuously the sublime or excellent virtue of all 10 paths of action. To accumulate all 10 paths, all 10 courses. Courses sounds like courses at dinner, like the first course, second course. Path sounds is, usually the word lam we translate as path. To accumulate the 10 paths means to fulfill the first 3 paths of action, such as abandoning killing. I'm changing Jimpa's translation. If you read his text, he says relinquishing, is a Tibetan word. Usually we translate as abandoning killing through his body, such as. So that means what are the 3 actions of body that are abandoned here? Do you know? Rachel knows for sure. Venerable Pamo, do you know the 3 negative states of body that are abandoned? Or physical actions that are abandoned?
Killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct.
Exactly. The 4 middling ones through their speech, which would be what? Lying, what? Who knows? Rachel, you were going to say before. What are the 4 of speech?
I'll probably get them in the wrong order. So it's lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, and idle gossip. Right.
And through the final courses of through the mind, which would be covetousness, malice, and wrong view. So at this point in the Madhyamaka Vatara, Bhasham, the auto commentary that Chandrakirti wrote to his Karikas, he actually quotes from the Dashibhumika, the Ten Bhumi Sutra. Lama Tsongkhapa leaves it out here. In fact, Jinpa's note 227 says in his commentary on these two lines of his root text, Chandrakirti cites the 10 Ground Sutra, the Dashibhumika, at length, enumerating each of the 10 non-virtuous actions and explaining how the Bodhisattva relinquishes involvement in any of these acts through his body, speech, and mind. How do I get back to that? Okay, there we go. So I'm going to quote that section that Chandrakirti himself cited, just so that we have some background. And later we may post this up on the Facebook page or the Shantideva Center page. So as taught in the second Bodhisattva ground, that means understood from the Dashibhumika, from the Ten Bhumi Sutra. So the different chapters of that, different sections of the Ten Bhumi Sutra. So one in the section that talked about the first ground, it talks about the various ways of giving and so forth and all the subsidiary topics. So talking about the second ground, there are more sections, but this is mentioned. Kulaputra, that means children of the conqueror. Galway say, okay. The bodhisattva who abides on the stainless ground of the bodhisattva, the stainless is the second ground, right? Has naturally abandoned killing, having given up clubs, weapons, abandoned resentment. They possess an abstention, from killing, and having engaged in compassion, they are beneficial, happy, merciful, and loving, and of loving mind toward all animate beings and spirits. The Sanskrit says prani bhuta, which some people just translate as beings, but prani itself means beings and bhuta means spirits. So I take it to mean more than other people translate that, doesn't have any animosity or wish to harm ordinary animate beings that you can see, or even spirits that you can't see. You know the story of Geshe Kanglungpa? Does anyone know? Story of Geshe Kanglungpa? No one's nodding yes. No? Okay. Geshe Kanglungpa was the Kadampa Geshe, who was always crying out of compassion for sentient beings. This is not the same as the always crying bodhisattva in the Prajna Paramita Sutra. This is someone more contemporary in the time of the Kadampa Geshes. Geshe Kanglungpa, even when there were spirits bothering him in his cave, he would be crying for them out of compassion, thinking, oh, they're creating negative karma, what's to happen? And they became, the spirits themselves came to understand that, and they were so abashed, embarrassed, that they left him in peace. Geshe Kanglungpa, present reincarnation is Konglung Rinpoche, who lives in Madison, Wisconsin, who is one of our, friends. He was the translator for Geshe Darge at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives for many years, along with Sharpa Tulku. It was Konglung Rinpoche. And so even one time in class, remember I mentioned that one day a week in the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives, when Geshe Darge, we would do meditation for a long time before just a short lecture. A lot of times people didn't come because they just wanted to hear the material, that they didn't want to meditate. And one time when we were meditating on the suffering of the lower realms, Kamal Rinpoche was translating, and he sort of was crying during the his explanation of what Geshe-la was saying. And one of the students was saying, people were whispering, what's happened? Did Kamaling's mother die, or did someone die, or why is he crying? They went to see Geshe Darge later, and he said, that's because of the imprint from previous lives when he was the, Geshe Kanlungpa, this great Kadampa Geshe, that just thinking about the suffering of sentient beings caused him to cry. Okay, so that's why I take it the what other people say, this word, the Sanskrit word prani bhuta, they take it as meaning just beings, animate beings. I take it as animate beings and spirits. If he does not produce harmfulness to animate beings, even through mere imagination, if he doesn't even imagine it, what need is there to mention recognizing sentient beings and purposely enacting evil deeds physically? So there's, if he doesn't even do it in imagination, there's no need to mention that he doesn't do it in actuality. So that's talking about killing. He is abandoned taking that which has not been given. That's actually the way that we usually, what do we usually call that in English? Taking what is not given.
Stealing.
Yeah, stealing. So you could just translate it as stealing, but it gives a slightly different flavor. Taking that which is not given. If you're given something, you can take it. But if it's not given, you shouldn't take it. He is abandoned taking without being given. Since satisfied with their own resources and having mercy as they care for others' resources, if he recognizes those things fully owned by others as owned by others, and having given up the mind to steal, he does not take what is not given, even so much as mere grass and leaves. No need to mention other kinds of necessities of life. If he's, one of the, in the monk's vows, one shouldn't even take, like in India, you would make these plates out of, what would they use? Palm leaves? I think they still do, don't they? Maybe if you go to
banana leaves, I think.
Banana leaves, banana, yeah, thank you. Yeah, maybe more in Thailand. Banana leaves as plates. So sometimes someone would stockpile those to have their meals. So even taking that is considered to be stealing. So if he doesn't take so much as mere grass and leaves, there's no need to mention that the bodhisattva on the stainless ground would not take the other, any kind of other material things that are necessary for life. So that's the second one. They have abandoned sexual misconduct with regard to desire. That's literally what it says. Some people just leave off, they take the with regard to desire is kind of modifying sexual misconduct. So it is a sensually motivated sexual misconduct, right? Since he is satisfied, and I'll just use the male pronoun here, just to make it shorter. It obviously applies to female also. Since he is satisfied with his own wife and is without desire for others' wives, he has no desire for others' wives, he does not generate even a thought of longing for women who are owned by others. Now that may sound strange. Let's say that are what's the word? When you make an agreement, when you're married to others, owned by others means that you've made a vow to be with them. He has no thought of longing for women owned by others, others' wives, and those protected by family, that are young and they're still under the, what would we call someone who didn't do that? They would be like a pedophile, right? Someone who's engaged with someone who's still under the influence of their family, who's still under the guidance or protection of their family. Is no longer for women owned by others' wives, and those protected by family, signs, and dharma, which would refer to, say, if you had taken ordination and so forth. Let alone, no need to mention reveling, reveling in improper passageways or the meeting of two organs of a couple. So the improper passageways would mean, from the Buddhist ethics, it's said that one would not engage in what normally is considered in our modern culture to be, well, by progressives, you know, like what we call anal intercourse, or what's it called, oral sex, or something like that. From the Buddhist perspective, they are considered also to be negative actions that are abandoned by someone on this second ground. Okay, so those are the three actions of enumerated, the three actions of body. He has abandoned speaking falsely, which we call lying. In speaking truly and speaking justly, speaking what is truth, he speaks at the proper time, acting in accordance with what was said, if even so much as in dreams. He does not speak false words through thoughts of deceiving. There's no need to mention speaking falsehoods purposely. Okay, there were some words I left out in that to make it more complicated. So they don't lie even in their dreams, so there's no need to say that they don't do it purposely. They've abandoned divisive words. So here, divisive words comes before harsh speech. He has abandoned divisive words since they do not create disunity among sentient beings and are engaged in non-harmfulness. Having heard from one side, he is not told to the other side in order to divide them. If he's heard something from one side, you know, of a group, you know, from some people, he doesn't sort of blabber to the other side in order to separate them, right? If not disuniting those reconciled and not further separating those that are divided, you could do two things. You can cause a division that wasn't there before, or you can further a division that was there. They do not speak words which make discord, either truly or falsely, being glad about discord and appreciative about discord. Okay, so I mentioned in a previous class when we talked about the 5 actions of immediate retribution. Remember, we were talking about what was the heaviest, and I think maybe Jennifer or someone said that wasn't killing. Is Jennifer still here? She had to go off. Okay, so whether killing was heavier or divisive speech, I said in some senses divisive speech was heaviest because it could include causing schism in the Sangha. According to the Abhidharma Kosha, schism in the Sangha is actually what? Do you know, Paul? Do you know, or John? Have you guys studied?
I don't remember.
Or maybe Stephen. Stephen, do you know?
Oh, thank you, Venerable George. I think it was actually very specific about dividing the Buddha from his disciples while the Buddha was still alive.
Right. So the question, the separate question, is that divisive speech or is that lie?
That, I believe, is divisive speech.
one would think that. So it can be both. According to Abhidharma Kosha, schism in the Sangha is lying. Why? Because generally lying is heavier than ordinary divisive speech, but it is both a lie and divisive speech when you cause division in the Sangha. So it's mentioned in the Abhidharma Kosha that simply not knowing and causing disunity, if you're not lying, that doesn't fit the muster, that doesn't muster up to divisive speech. It has to be something knowing. It has to be someone who's clever and intelligent. Otherwise, their speech would not be accepted by the other disciples and so forth. So there are a lot of qualifications in the Abhidharma Kosha. I remember when we studied Abhidharma Kosha at Kopan with our teacher there, we told a story about Lama Yeshe. You know, in Abhidharma Kosha, there's all these in the Karikas, in the root verses, very, very brief, you know, sort of like enigmatic kind of things. In the third, there are 4. You know, like in the third realm, there are 4 of this or something. And he told a story about Lama Yeshe debating in the courtyard when they were young at Sera in Tibet. And Lama Yeshe had a very knowledgeable opponent, and Lama would say, in the 5th, there are 7. And what are they? And the other person couldn't make the connection of, you know, for that particular karika at that point. So it's said that the Tibetan Geshes, when they were in their La Rampa class, that's the highest of the classes, and once they had finished, once they had received their Geshe degree, they would spend their times when they had meals together and discussion, you know, debating all of these subtle facts in order to hone their own understanding. So those of you who are longtime students, you know, maybe Paul should debate with Jennifer or with John, and those of you who know something of the Dharma, when you talk to one another, you can ask each other questions, you know, try to increase your understanding. So that's divisive words. He has abandoned harsh words, the types of words which threaten, abuse, harm others, expose others' faults, express in the presence and endeavor to express in the presence of words of country people. I mean, it's the uncivilized, you know, harsh words meaning using kind of coarse speech, right? Vulgarities. He abandons what is false and unpleasant to hear, arisen from anger and abuse, words which offend because they're disagreeable, that produce grief in the heart, produce torment, and make the continuum of one's consciousness and the continuum of others' people's consciousness unworkable. Like that are to be abandoned. So not to speak words that are harmful to others, expose their faults, it cause misery and so forth. Those are all included in harsh speech. So the Bodhisattva in the second bhumi doesn't speak that way. Okay. Types of words which are tender, soft, and agreeable, which are not false, which are pleasant to hear, dear to the heart, dear to the hearts of the city dwellers and crowds, agreeable to the minds of crowds, producing joyous mind and producing satisfied mind, and producing clarity in one's own consciousness, one's own mental continuum and the mental continuum of others, like that are to be expressed. You don't express things which are harmful to others, but you do express what is good. He has abandoned senseless words, or we could say idle gossip. He speaks words which give proper answers and at the proper time, speaks justly, speaks with meaning, speaks the Dharma, speaks suitably, speaks to subdue, and speaks words which are clever and timely. If he completely abandons even as much as objects of complete abandonment of making jokes, let alone no need to mention distracting through words. So, what is it? If he completely abandons even as much as the objects of complete abandonment of making jokes. So that doesn't mean that the Bodhisattva doesn't joke. You know, in the praises of the Dalai Lama that have come out in defense of him recently, it's many of them have said how the Dalai Lama often jokes, you know, tugs on the beard of someone or pulls their ear, or, you know, if they have a nose, big nose, oh, yeah, and pulls their nose and jokes with them and so forth. So that kind of closeness and compassionate activity is not what's meant here by joking, you know, joking in the sense of, you know, trying to fool someone and, just telling jokes just for senseless reasons like that. Okay, so those are the 4 actions of speech, negative actions of speech that are abandoned. So lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, and idle gossip. And he is also without a covetous mind with regard to the wealth of others, that which is desired by others. You know, you don't covet that which other people want. The substances of others and articles fully owned by others. He does not generate a covetous mind, does not cling, does not wish for. He does not generate the mind of attachment. So covetousness means, you know, when you have a state of mind that's called covetousness, it's not just ordinary attachment. It's a kind of attachment that's been intensified to the point where you think, I'm going to get that, you know, one way or the other. So you can't have it in your mind. Say, for instance, when you talk about malice, which we will talk about next, malice is a thought not just of hatred for someone or desire to harm them right now, but keeping in your mind, I'm going to get them sooner or later, right? What do we call that? Kind of holding a grudge, or, you know, planning, you know. So when the right time comes, you're going to get them. What's that famous thing they say, famous thing about revenge is best served cold?
Yeah, a dish that is best served cold.
Is it revenge, or what's the word they use?
Yeah, revenge is a dish that is best served cold.
Right. Yeah. So that kind of state of mind is really malice. So here the counterpart in attachment, you know, like, I'm going to get it one way or the other. When they're not looking, maybe it'll be years from now, you know, on their deathbed, I'm going to get it. He is without malice, since having toward all sentient beings the mind of love, the mind of benefit, the mind of compassion, a happy mind, a soft mind, and the mind which benefits all beings, having abandoned anger, resentment, hatred, defilement, harmful mind, and those which precede anger, those which have love are realized. Okay. He has abandoned wrong view. He abides in the right path with right view and is separated from having the views of lucky omens, thinking, this kind of means divination and horoscopes and stuff, things like that, various kinds of auspiciousness and bad morality, since his view is honest and without dissimulation, without deceit. Without deceit, he is definite to think about the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. There, the first three paths of virtuous actions are completed by his body, the middle four by speech, and the last three by mind. Hence, he accumulates also the 10 paths of virtuous actions. So that's the quotation that Chandrakirti cited in his Madhyamaka Vatara Bhasham. It wasn't in the Karakas, obviously, it was in his commentary to these lines. Lama Tsongkhapa just leaves them out here. So I thought it was worth having that for completion. How are we doing? Making sense? Okay. Okay. So in pursuing this, not only does the Bodhisattva refrain from transgressing the bounds of proscribed acts. This is something I kept on getting mistake. I think in a previous lecture, I was getting confused also. That which is proscribed and that which is prescribed is another way of saying that which you shouldn't do, the Buddha said you shouldn't do, and that what the Buddha said you should do. Prescribed is that what the Buddha said, you should be kind, you should do these things. Proscribed are those things you shouldn't do. Not only does the Bodhisattva refrain from transgressing the bounds of proscribed acts, he also accomplishes all the positive prescriptions, the prescribed acts of the moral code. And in note 228, Jimpa says, Gakche and Drupche. So the che at the end is meaning that which is formulated by the Buddha, that which the Buddha, we say formulations. You should do this or you should not do this. Where is that? Yeah, that note 228. Gak means proscribed. You should, the formulations of, you could say gakche means that is, like he says here, the distinction here is between what could be characterized as thou shalt not, that would be gakche, saying you have to cease that, and thou shall, drupche. Drup means you should accomplish, formulations that you should accomplish. They could be characterized as thou shalt not and thou shalt injunctions. Generally speaking, in Buddhist ethics, the practice of morality moves from the basic level of refraining from the standard 10 unwholesome actions, 3 physical acts of body, of killing, stealing, engaging in sexual misconduct, the 4 verbal acts of telling lies, using divisive speech, speaking harshly, and indulging in senseless gossip, and the 3 mental acts of harboring covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong views. It travels to more advanced disciplines involving even more prescriptions, including positive ones. The Bodhisattva ethics is an example of such advanced morality. So that means that the Bodhisattva morality, remember the threefold morality, is not simply abstaining from negative actions, but collecting virtuous dharmas and benefiting sentient beings. And he mentions that you can find more in the Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on the morality chapter of the Bodhisattva grounds, Jangsa, and he quotes Tatz's chapter on ethics. So I've mentioned that before. That's a text that you can get a PDF of, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on a Sangha's text, the Bodhisattva Bhumi, on the chapter of ethics. And very, very incredible if you ever have a chance to study that. All of the details of the Bodhisattva vows, how they all are fit into these different kinds of morality. Okay. We okay? We're doing okay? So next outline. How morality becomes superior compared to the first ground. So now he quotes the second verse of chapter 2 of the second mind generation. Not only this path of virtue, but all 10 deeds, he becomes most excellent and pure. Just as the radiant autumn moon adorns the night sky, morality adorns him with peace and radiance. So again, Jeffrey translates that verse a little bit differently, and he breaks it up. It separates it into different parts, not all at one place. For him, these 10 paths of virtue perfected are extremely pure. Like an autumn moon, he is always pure, beautified by them, serene and radiant. Okay, so in commentary, Lama Tsongkhapa says, one might ask, isn't it the case that these 10 paths of positive actions are accumulated in their entirety on the bodhisattva, by the bodhisattva on the first ground as well? Doesn't the bodhisattva on the first ground also, what's he say, accumulate, collect these 10 paths of positive action? Well, yeah, right. Even before that, even before the first ground, the bodhisattva collects them. But the reply is, yes, they do accumulate them, say on the first ground. However, to the extent that the second ground bodhisattva excels in not only this path of virtue in general, but in all 10 courses of positive deeds, he becomes most excellent and pure to an extent beyond the bodhisattva on the first ground. So there's something special about when we talk about the surpassing practice of morality on the second ground, it surpasses that of the practice of morality before that, or the practice of the perfection of morality before that. Because he already possesses optimally the superior generosity described in the discussion of the first ground, right? And since among the remaining 9 perfections, what are the 9? Why does it say 9 perfections? Aren't there 6 perfections, Richard?
I know that there are 3 more and they're tagged to the 3 final bhumis, but I don't recall their names.
Actually, there are 4 more. When he's saying the 9 remaining, that means other than morality. So he's considering there are 10 perfections. So after the perfection of wisdom, the 6th of the 6 perfections, there are also other perfections of what are the other perfections? Does anyone know? Anna, do you know the other perfections?
Venerable, doesn't it have to do something all about wisdom? It's
Well,
still
the last one is.
wisdom.
So the last one is the perfection of jnana that we talked about. But Rachel, you know what the other ones are.
Method, wishes.
Yeah, method. Let's say skill and means. You say method.
Power.
Prayer, power, and
exalted
wisdom. Exalted wisdom. So, when we talk about the prayers of Samantabhadra and so forth and so on. So skill and means, you've heard of that before, right? Skillful means on the 7th bhumi, and method. And what were we just saying? Skill and means, prayer, power, and wisdom. So it's say the other 9, other than Shila. Okay. And since among the remaining 9 perfections, he does not possess the excellence in the practices of patience, he translates forbearance and so on, to the extent he has for morality, morality is described as superior here, surpassing. It is not that the other perfections are not present, or the practice of the other perfections are not present. The reference to the 10 deeds is but an illustration of the prescriptive morality intended, so we must include here all positive prescriptions of morality as well. Jeffrey translates that last sentence. The 10 virtues are mentioned to illustrate the formulations of ethics based on them, and the bodhisattva maintains all those of proper ethics. Okay. So now the last two lines of that stanza that he put all together. Like an autumn moon, he is always pure, beautified by them, serene and radiant. The commentary is, just as the radiant autumn moon possesses the twin qualities of cooling the scorching pain of heat and being resplendent with a white halo of light, likewise the bodhisattva who always abides in utterly pure ethical discipline. So those of you who've been to India or to other places in tropical lands, when it says the radiant autumn moon, what does that bring to mind? John, you were in, oh, John's disappeared. Paul, you were in India for some time, no? Or no?
Moderate lengths of time,
Yeah,
not extensive.
Yeah. So what happens during the hot season in India? You know, maybe said the monsoons come,
Right.
and then afterwards you have the cooling time of autumn. It says the twin qualities of cooling the scorching pain of heat. So the autumn moon, you know, after the hot season and the rainy season, the monsoons, it sort of cools. It has this cooling effect that is very, very pleasant. So the radiant autumn moon has that kind of implication, and also resplendent with a white halo of light. Likewise, the bodhisattva who always abides in utterly pure ethical discipline, the one who abides in such pure morality, is adorned beautifully with the peace of having guarded the doors of his senses and radiance such that his body glows with light. Okay, sort of poetry. Okay, so next section. Oh wait, let's see. Any questions? Is that clear? Okay. Other causes that purify morality. So this is the third verse of the Karikas. Should he, though pure, see in terms of intrinsic nature? Let me translate. Jeffrey says, if he views his ethics as inherently pure, you know, as truly existent, inherently existently pure, his morality will remain impure because of this. Okay. Thus, with respect to all three elements of discipline, he always remains free of the flow of dualistic thoughts. Does that make sense? Should he, though pure, if he, though pure, see in terms of intrinsic nature, or as Jeffrey says, if he views his ethics as inherently pure, his morality or their purity will not be complete. His morality will remain impure because of this. So this is talking about, the bodhisattva on the second ground doesn't have this fault, but if someone were to, say, an ordinary monk were to view their morality, even though they're keeping all of the vows of the bhikshu, let's say, of the fully ordained monk or the fully ordained nun or the novice monk or the novice nun, even though they're keeping their perfectly, you know, to the sight of ordinary beings, if their mind is grasping that their morality is inherently pure, then they are not. They are not pure. So a fully ordained monk, a bhikshu, may be especially pure in his morality with respect to the pratimoksha monastic vows, but should he not relinquish if he doesn't give up seeing phenomena as established through their intrinsic nature, if he doesn't abandon grasping phenomena as inherently existent, this monk's excuse me, this monk's morality will remain impure for this reason. He will be like, Jimpa makes it quite strong, he will be like a moral degenerate who pretends to be endowed with moral discipline. That sounds a bit harsh, right? He will be like a moral degenerate. Jeffrey translates it a little more literally. However, if they do not abandon the view that phenomena inherently exist, then their ethics will not be pure, but will be faulty, though apparently proper. Jimpa translates the verse, the word faulty, false discipline, as moral degenerate. This sounds a little strong. Moral degenerate sounds like political talk. Okay, so from the Ratnakuta Sutra, the Heap of Jewels Sutra, Nadine, did you say you were reading the parts of the Ratnakuta every day?
Yes, I've started reading the Ratnakuta, but not finished.
Not finished, okay.
It's long.
Yeah, it's very long. So there's one chapter in the Ratnakuta. Well, you could say it's one sutra itself that was incorporated into this very long sutra, one of the Mahapulya sutras. In the Mahayana, there were these great sutras that were many, many chapters that seem to have been individual sutras in the past that were combined into one. So this is the chapter requested by Kashyapya. Kashyapya was the Hinayana Arhat, the foremost in ascetic practices. And so he's the one that Buddha Shakyamuni gave the Buddha's first very rough robe that he had from the time when he was sitting in 12 years of ascetic practices with the 5 other disciples. At the end, they were almost naked, and he was bequeathed this shroud that was around a lady that was being brought to burial. He was bestowed that to cover his nakedness with very, very rough cloth, so you wouldn't have fine linen usually as a shroud. And he gave that to Kashyapya, and Kashyapya became foremost in these, in the Hinayana, they call about the 13 Dhutangas, the 13 ascetic practices. And in the Mahayana, they count 12, slightly different enumeration. We'll talk about that in a minute. So in the Ratnakuta, in the Heap of Jewels Sutra, in the chapter requested by Kashyapya, it says, so the Buddha's talking to Kashyapya. He says, Kashyapya, now here, some ordained monks who are endowed with moral discipline, they're keeping their pratimoksha vows, who are restrained by pratimoksha vows and abide in them, whose rites and sphere of conduct are perfect. They're performing the bi-monthly confession, various rites and so forth, and their conduct is perfect, who view minute reprehensible acts with fear. So they're good monks. They're hesitant. They're fearful to even break the minor vows, even minute reprehensible acts with fear. Having correctly taken the precepts, they cultivate the bases of the training, become endowed with perfectly pure actions of body, speech, and mind. Because of these, their way of life is perfectly pure, but they still speak in terms of selfhood. This is not talking about all monks. This is talking about those who are still grasping to inherent existence. Because of these, Because of these, their way of life is perfectly pure, but they still speak in terms of selfhood. Kashyapya, Buddha is saying, talking to Kashyapya, this is the first example of a moral degenerate pretending to be endowed with moral discipline. Or as Jeffrey translates, Kashyapya, they are the first of those seeming to have proper ethics, which are in fact faulty. You don't have to think moral degenerate. That sounds like really heavy language, right? And Buddha continues, Kashyapya, again here, some ordained monks embrace perfectly the 12 learned qualities. You say learned or learned qualities here? How do you pronounce that word? In the text, he's right. Learned. Is that learned or learned?
Learned, I think, because it's an adjective. I think if it's a verb, it would be learned, but as an adjective, I think it's learned. Oh, sorry, now I'm getting
in Hopkins, it's translated as training. So
right.
Perhaps it's learned.
Right. So this is I'm trying to see if I thought I had that here. Oh, somehow I lost that note. Let's see, is that here? So this is talking about
195 in the Hopkins.
Right. No, I'm talking about the Tibetan of that. So Jimpa in note 229 says the discourse of Kashyapya. He doesn't say more about that here. But this is talking about the 12 Dhutangas, the 12 ascetic practices that are recognized by the Mahayana. Remember I mentioned before, generally in the Hinayana, they talk about the 13 ascetic practices. In the Mahayana, they talk about 12. And I thought I must have lost that note here. Maybe it's coming later, talking about what these ascetic activities are. So between these two paragraphs here, where it says Kashyapya, now here some ordained monks who are endowed with moral discipline, and then the second paragraph that says Kashyapya, again here some ordained monks embrace perfectly the 12 learned qualities, which means the 12 ascetic practices. Between that, there are two other verses that I've taken from the Kashyapya chapter and translated. So let me read between that first and second, there's two other verses. Kashyapya, furthermore, some bhikshus uphold Vinaya and reside in Vinaya. Although they abide in the mode of Vinaya, they do not move from the view of the transitory collection. What's the view of the transitory collection? Mikhail, do you know?
The view grasping at the self as inherently existing, yeah.
Yeah, the view of the transitory collection is one of the five wrong views, right? And so that's equivalent in the Mahayana. That's equivalent to ignorance, but particularly grasping to the self as being inherently existent. They do not divert from the view of the transitory collection. Kashyapya, that is faulty morality, the second counterfeit type of possessing morality. Rather than saying moral degenerate, it's a counterfeit type of possessing morality. Then another verse that's skipped over, he just gives of these four verses, Lama Khapa just quotes the first and the fourth. So I just gave the second. Third one is Kashyapya. Furthermore, some bhikshus abide in love. Although they possess love, observing sentient beings, they are terrified having heard that all products are unborn. What does that mean? If they heard that products are unborn? Stephen, do you know what that means?
They are empty of inherent existence.
Yeah, unborn particularly means when you talk about products, products are things that are created, right? That are born at some time, that are produced or generated. So we say not inherently generated, not inherently born, or you could say unborn. That means they are not born inherently existent. So furthermore, Kashyapya, some bhikshus abide in love, although they possess love observing sentient beings, they are terrified, having heard that all products are unborn. When they hear that the teachings that products are unborn, they become terrified, they become panicked and hysterical. Kashyapya, that is faulty morality, the third counterfeit type of possessing morality. So these four stanzas are talking about four kinds of counterfeit or seemingly pure morality that are actually impure. So the Bodhisattva on the second ground has realized emptiness directly, has abandoned the intellectually formed view of the transitory collection, in the intellectually formed ignorance has been abandoned. So that second grounder doesn't have that problem. But even in the Hinayana tradition, or monks before they've realized emptiness, even though it looks like they're keeping perfect morality, the Buddha doesn't accept that as pure morality. Does it make sense? Melvin, does that make sense to you? Are you there? Melvin's off having a cup of tea, maybe. Okay.
No, I'm here. I just couldn't figure out how to use my phone. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So Lama Tsongkhapa just quotes two of those four verses. So then, oh, I know what I wanted to say. So of these what are called dutanga. In Tibetan, we say jangwe yenlak. In Pali, literally, it means the limbs of scrupulousness, or in other words, austerities or ascetic practices. I'm reading from a definition from the Princeton Dictionary of Buddhism that some of you may know of, that is a good resource. The Buddhist hybrid Sanskrit term dutaguna. So in that term, guna is qualities. So I think here, when they talked about the 12, what did he talk about? The 12 learned qualities. That's the word guna. That's part of this dutanga, or dutaguna, another way of saying it. Dutanga is one way of saying it. Dutaguna means sort of having the qualities, purified qualities. Dutanga refers to specific set of 13 ascetic practices in the Hinayana that the Buddha authorized monks to adopt voluntarily for the purposes of cultivating contentedness with little, to be content with little, to cultivate detachment, energy, and moderation. So these are the qualities that Kashyapya was foremost in practicing. These austerities are not enjoined on monks and nuns by the Vinaya. They're not prescribed. The monks and nuns should do these 13 qualities, these 13 practices. It's like people that wanted to go further, like extreme mode, or I'm not sure what you'd call today. But they're rather optional practices that monastics were sanctioned to adopt for limited periods of time in order to foster sensory restraint, an important constituent of morality. Based on the Buddha's own failed experiments with extreme mortification of the flesh, Remember, the Buddha at first went to extremes, settled on a middle way. As a practice conducive to enlightenment, while he was a bodhisattva, this specific set of practices was considered to provide a middle way between self-mortification and sensual indulgence. So when we would take, at Koban, when we would take the Mahayana precepts, we would adopt some of these, and you'll see which ones. So let me read to you these 13. The 13 authorized practices are wearing patched robes made from discarded cloth rather than cloth donated by lay people. So today, generally, when monks and nuns have robes, maybe they have to purchase their material to make their robes at the store. I don't know, maybe there are even places that sell robes fully made, but generally in Tibet, lay people would offer the cloth, and you would have, and maybe they would even offer payment to a tailor to make the robes. That's completely legitimate according to the Vinaya. But one of the ascetic practices is to make your robe from discarded cloth, maybe from a refuse bin. In fact, there's a whole list of places that it can be taken. Things that are found in the charnel ground, as shrouds and other things. These are ascetic practices, okay? So wearing patch robes made from discarded cloth, that's one. Wearing only 3 robes. That means not having more, not having other kinds of things, only 3 robes. That doesn't sound too bad, right? Going for alms. So that's considered an ascetic practice. I think in the modern Theravada, in some places, the followers of some of these Thai forest monks, they even when they're in England, they go on alms all the time. That's usually considered an ascetic practice rather than going back to the monastery and receiving food that's offered at the monastery, at your residence. So going for alms, not omitting any house while on alms round, this is the 4th one, rather than begging only at those houses known to provide good food. Does that make sense? So for instance, one of the ascetic practices would be, you know that, Diana and Brock give really good alms, and you skip John's house, might be more frugal. Maybe he gives you gruel or something like that. So only you avoid doing that. You go to every house, okay? Not omitting any house. 5th one is eating only what can be eaten at one sitting. And so that's one of the vows that we would abide in when we took the 24-hour precepts. When you start your one meal, or if you take it slightly looser, you have breakfast and lunch, but you don't eat after midday. You only eat at one sitting. As soon as you get up, you stop eating. Eating only 6th, eating only food received in the alms bowl rather than more elaborate meals presented to the Sangha. Okay, so you have your own alms bowl. That's what we saw, pindapata. What does pindapata mean? Do our Sanskritists know here?
Pindapata?
Yeah. Paul, do you know? Yeah.
Well, pinda is alms.
Yeah.
So pindapata is just yes, isn't it just subsisting on alms? Isn't it?
Pata means bowl. So
that's right.
is that which is dropped in your bowl.
Right.
So that means going for alms. So eating only food received in the alms bowl rather than more elaborate presented to the Sangha. 7th one is refusing more food after indicating one has eaten enough. So even though you're sitting once you've indicated that you've had it enough, what is a mudra? Like this, I'm filled, once you've indicated that, you don't eat anymore, you refuse more food. 8th one is dwelling in the forest. 9th is dwelling at the root of a tree. These are ascetic practices. You might think that in the time of the Buddha, a lot of monks did this. Maybe some did, but these were the 13 Dhutangas. Dwelling in the open air, using only a tent made from one's own robes as shelter. That's really radical, right? You know, not even being under a tree. At the most, you're out in the open air, and you can, when it's raining or something, you can put your robes above you on some sticks or something to protect you. 11th, dwelling in a charnel ground. 12, satisfaction with whatever dwelling one has. And 13, sleeping in a sitting posture without ever lying down. I know some monks and nuns who still practice that today. Always sitting, never lying down, and so forth. Okay, so those are the 13. I'll just read a little bit more. The comparable Mahayana list of 12 Dhutangas, or Dhutagunas, the qualities, are essentially the same, dropping the 2 practices of involving eating, numbers 5 and 6, eating what can only be eaten in one session and eating only food received in the alms bowl, leaving those out and adding an additional rule on wearing only garments made of coarse hemp and wool. Okay, there's more, but I will post those up. If they haven't been posted already on the Facebook page, I'll post those later if you're interested to know about those. Has anyone ever heard of those before, the 13 ascetic practices? Diana has, Rachel hasn't. Anna, have you heard of those before? Huh? Richard, have you heard?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So that's sort of mainstream in the Theravada Buddhism, is very, very important. They talk about these. And Kashyapya was the foremost in the practice of ascetic practices. That's why maybe it's mentioned here. Maybe the Buddha was telling Kashyapya, if you were to embrace perfectly the 12 ascetic practices, here Jimpa calls them learned qualities, but they objectify them, those that abide with grasping at I and grasping at mind, O Kashyapya. This is the 4th example of a counterfeit person who's practicing morality. Okay, making sense? So then text continues, to speak of selfhood is to objectify, or as Jeffrey says, propound a self means viewing with apprehension of inherent existence. That's what it means, speak of selfhood. So where does that word come in Jimpa's translation? In the first of the 2 paragraphs that are translated here. Because of these, their way of life is perfectly pure, but they still speak in terms of selfhood. So Lama Tsongkhapa comments that to speak of selfhood is to objectify, or as Jeffrey says, to propound a self. To speak of selfhood means viewing with grasping at inherent existence. This is indicated by abiding with grasping at I and grasping at mine, and its meaning should not be understood in terms of the commonly shared notion of the identity view. Jimpa's translation, identity view, is what we call the view of the transitory collection. So it shouldn't be the commonly held view that grasping at the person as being self-supporting, substantially existent. Not that. Rather, it should be understood as not giving up grasping at I and mind as existing through their intrinsic characteristics or as inherently existent. Since the pronoun he cannot be related to what has immediately preceded at the end of the previous verse, the following translation of naxo seems to be better. Remember when we talked about translators, most of the Madhyamaka texts that we have in the Kangyur today were translated by Patsap, what's the full name? Patsap Nimaja. So Naxo Lotsawa was another translator. In fact, of the at the beginning of our class today, was it today? Anyway, there's some prayers that were translated. Oh, I know, in Martin Wilson's text in praise of Tara, he mentions that some lamas criticized, even some Kadampa lamas spoke poorly of Naxo Lotsawa because he was not present when Atisha was cremated and some other things like this. But he's considered to be a very, very good translator. So Lama Tsongkhapa quotes Naxo here. So which part of that verse are we talking about? Remember the verse 2-3, just a little bit earlier, the Karika. Should he, though pure, see in terms of intrinsic nature, his morality will remain impure because of this? So Naxo translated that part of the stanza as, if one sees his discipline to be pure intrinsically, by this he becomes morally degenerate. Or as Jeffrey translates that, if he viewed his ethics as inherently pure, then his ethics would be faulty. Because one's morality does not become purified if one does not relinquish object-laden views. Or as Jeffrey says, if the view apprehending inherent existence is not abandoned, ethics are not pure. Because one's morality does not become purified if one does not relinquish object-laden views. I'm not sure where Jimpy gets that terminology. The bodhisattva on the second ground always remains free of the flow of dualistic thoughts, grasping at intrinsic existence, inherent existence, in terms of real versus unreal, and so on. With respect to all three elements, the beings in relation to whom immorality is to be relinquished, what antidote is applied to relinquish, and who relinquishes them. So this is talking about the three spheres. Remember when we were talking earlier. So, or as Jeffrey says, here the view of inherent existence is forsaken with respect to the three spheres, sentient beings with respect to whom faulty ethics are abandoned. So that that's the person you're abandoning, killing sentient being A over there. That's one of the three spheres. The antidote used to abandon them, that is not intrinsically existent, not inherently existent, and the agent of abandonment. So Jimpa translates agent as who relinquishes them or who abandons them. Okay, so that's where we're going to stop. Okay, so the next time we're going to begin with this next outline, the praises of morality. And remind me, so in Jimpa's text, this is what page?
120.
120. You can make a note. And in Hopkins' text, where is that?
190.
197?
196.
196. Okay. And for those who just have the digital edition, just search for The Praises of Morality. That's this section. Okay. So how are we doing? Making sense?
Yeah.
Ron, do you have any questions? Oh, okay. Melvin, any questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Sheila, Suvansh? Can't see from.
I'm good, thank you.
Okay, good. Okay. So, yeah, our dear primordial guru, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, has passed away. He's exited the clear light of meditation of death, the Tukdam. Let me just see. The long life prayer composed by His Holiness is being translated into English by the FPMT. Jonah, the head of the education department, did a translation. Venerable Steve, who's my dear friend for many years, is editing that. Then it will go to someone named Doris for English correction or something like that. So it's not, Venerable Steve told me that if it was ready by the end of class, he would send it. So the English translation of that is not available yet. And okay, so we will I'm just checking to see if anyone. Okay, there's some other things. So we will do our dedication prayers now. There are already dedication or prayers for the quick return of Lama Zopa. One composed by Jado Rinpoche, which is translated in English. One by Kandola, who is overseeing the embalming process that Fabrizio hastily translated. I don't have them easily accessible right now, so we're just going to do a little dedication now, thinking of the qualities of Lama Zopa Rinpoche and dedicating our merits, particularly today, of course, for our achievement of enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, but in particular for the swift return. That means a swift reincarnation in a form that we can recognize as a human in the world today of the, inestimable Lama Zopa Rinpoche, our primordial guru from beginningless time. That doesn't mean that he's our only guru when I say primordial guru, but in the sense that representative, the gurus that guide us in our life now, we can kind of think of as the Dharmakaya, that has looked upon us, looked after us, guided us in various guises in numberless lives since beginningless time. The primordial guru. When Lama Yeshe had passed away, and we were in Dharamsala in McLeodganj in Tushita, Lama Zopa spoke eloquently for some time about Lama Yeshe's guidance of us. He referred to him as our primordial guru. Lama Zopa also our primordial guru, our heart guru, who's looked after us since beginning of this time. May have been a different mind stream that was guiding us, but it's all like one continuum of Dharmakaya in a sense. So sit comfortably for a moment. Recall that we've created virtuous karma today, thinking about the method side and the wisdom side. in these teachings of Lama Tsongkhapa about emptiness and about the extensive deeds. Say, for instance, the 13 ascetic practices are certainly on the method side. We've accumulated virtuous karma and we've accumulated wisdom. In addition to dedicating them to our quick enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, dedicate them that we might quickly have the fortune, maybe ourselves, of seeing the return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's reincarnation. May the merits and wisdom I've collected today become the cause of the swift return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche. Okay, so thank you very much. I will lead the prayers, the Tara prayers for Shantideva Center on Monday, and we will be doing a short Chittamani practice and several other practices along with this prayer that was given to Atisha by Tara that we recited 7 times at the beginning. If you have a chance of doing that, that prayer, was it, I can't remember, was it put up in the chat?
It was the link to the Shantideva website where it is posted. It was put in.
Oh, it's posted already. I'm talking about the Atisha prayer that I gave you this morning.
Yes.
So that's up there. So if you can download that, in addition to the prayer that Venerable Rubina led us in, that was composed by the Lama in the 1800s, very moving, that Lama Yeshe used to quote also. Those kind of practices can be very beneficial. So good to see you all. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care. See you on next week and possibly on Monday for our discussion group at 2 and for the Shantideva Tara session at 12:30.
Excuse me, does anybody know if there is yet a plan for 12:30 Sunday? John Landau said he is doing Tuesday, and we know that Venerable George is doing Monday.
Yes, it's Venerable Rubina.
Okay, so that is going to happen. Thank you.
Yes, every day.
Every day there will be something at 12:30. Okay.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Venerable George.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Ellen.